Got a Nissan Maxima here, where it's here for a tune-up slash misfire. I believe it's a cylinder 5 if I remember correctly. What year is this one? It's a '06. That's what I was thinking. So just like any misfire, first thing I want to do is crank the engine over, see what it sounds like, make sure it's not a mechanical issue. So put it in clear flood mode. Sounds good to me. I don't hear anything out of the ordinary. So I'm gonna go ahead and pull it into the garage. I wasn't able to diagnose the car. The owner didn't want to pay for me to diagnose it. But I told her, hey, chances are it's going to be an ignition coil. And number 5 happens to be underneath the intake manifold. So I told her, since we're going in there, of course, you know, we're gonna have to change all the spark plugs because she's never had a tune-up done on this thing since she's owned it for like the past, I don't know, going on 3 years or something like that. So we're gonna change spark plugs. And we're just shooting in the dark here, and we ordered 1 ignition coil. And I also made her clear that since you did not pay me to diagnose the car, and if it does not fix the car, I'm not responsible because you did not want to pay for me to diagnose it. I hope that makes sense. Alright, so let's pull it into the garage and get started on this thing. The thing I noticed about this car is that it's idling kind of high, and when you go to put it in reverse from park into drive, whole car is shaking when you go into gear, back into reverse. That was a hard one. From the looks of this, there is a slight vacuum leak somewhere, and that's probably what's causing this thing to idle so high. Well, this sucks. I think it just broke my scope. I had it right here, and when I was in the car switching between drive and reverse, how the transmission was shifting hard, the scope fell off of the car, just hit the ground right here. Come to look at it, and it's turned off, and it doesn't want to turn back on. Check the battery on it already, and it's fine. That's not good. So I got it working again. Just turned back on after a few minutes. I don't know, whatever, it works. So here's the thing. Looks like ignition coil number 5. It's actually accessible from right here. You don't really have to remove the whole intake manifold, but we still gotta take it off because of the tune-up. You know, we still got to change the spark plugs. The misfire isn't always here. Like when I was using my scope here to check the ignition coil, it seemed to be working fine. Then you shut the car off for like 10 minutes, you come back to it, and all of a sudden it's misfiring again. But it only misfires for like, you know, a minute after you turn it on, or 30 seconds, whatever. Point is, it's not always there. It's a little bit concerning to me, because how do we know it's not a bad fuel injector? You know what I mean? That's why I said we're just gonna shoot the parts cannon at it because it's what the owner wants. But now I'm starting to wonder, what if it is a fuel injector and we go in there, we do all this, and the problem is still here, and all of a sudden we just did all this work, and if it turns out to be the fuel injector, we're gonna have to take all this back apart again. This sucks. So I figured if I could find a fuse for the injectors, I could probably get a current ramp test on them. But look at this. Honestly, right here I don't see anything that says injector, but then again, half of this key or legend is destroyed. I can't even read it, so that's a waste of time. Same thing over here. This right here is very hard to read, but again, looking at it closely, I don't see anything that says injector. The closest thing I see is fuel pump, which is not what we need. I'm not gonna, it's just eating up my time now. I'm not gonna go out of my way for this. Owner wants me to change these parts. That's what we're gonna change. I just hate this, you know, and people don't want to pay to diagnose the car properly, and you just have your doubts, but the owner just wants to throw parts at it. It sucks. Alright, so instead of just beating myself up with a bunch of what ifs and wasting time, I decided, you know what, let me go ahead and pull out the front 3 spark plugs. Just look at the spark plugs and go from there. So here goes the one out of this cylinder right here, and look at the gap on that spark plug compared to what it should be like. That's a pretty big gap. So this alone, now I feel more confident going in here just to change the spark plugs, and this can explain our random multiple misfires. If all the spark plugs are in this state, then yeah, I could see this causing random misfires. Now I don't feel so bad about going in there. Number 5 is still going to get the ignition coil. And here goes the other 2 spark plugs. You can see the gap on them is just as big. Again, compared to a new one. The air filter looks like it could use some replacing. Nothing crazy, but we do have a new air filter for it here. The mass airflow sensor, it's hard for you guys to see inside of there, but to me it does look a little bit dirty, so I'm gonna go ahead and clean that out with some mass airflow cleaner. As you can see, I got the intake manifold removed and it just got it pushed aside for now. The reason why it's not completely off of the car is because of one line going right here, this one. That's coolant, I believe, going into the intake manifold, so I don't want to open that up, so you know, you got more than enough space if you move it sideways. Anyway, here goes the spark plugs that came out the back. The gap on number 5 is much larger than these two. Honestly, I expected the rear bank to have larger or just more worn out gaps, because that's typically what I see is the ones that are harder to get to. Sometimes people don't even bother with them. They'll only do like the front 3 cylinders, which is really silly, but I've seen it before. But still, nonetheless, these are still worn out, especially number 5 where we had our Misfire code for. You can see it's a pretty big gap, but I found the smoking gun here, guys. So this is the ignition coil for number 5, and what do we see on it? See the white stuff? We have arcing right at the base of this ignition coil. So I did make the right call on getting a new ignition coil on this and changing the spark plugs. Now I'm not worried about the fuel injectors at this point. I'm not saying we can't have an issue there, but you know, most likely this is our issue right here. So here goes the new ignition coil. It's a Delphi unit, and as you can see right there, Echo and Japón. There you go, you just got schooled. Alright, so I'm gonna go ahead and pop this in and start putting everything back together. The new spark plugs are in it already. I have a new gasket right here for this intake manifold, so I'm gonna go ahead and replace this one as well. Everything is moving along here. As you can see, I got the intake manifold back in place. The new gasket is on it. And just working my way up to getting it all put back together. Like I said, it's going to get a new air filter. Got to clean out the MAF still. And we also have a new cabin air filter. So I'm going to go ahead and knock that out. We'll see what that filter inside the car looks like. I'm pretty sure I got everything put back together and plugged in. I even had to reroute the wire for the throttle body because you actually had to pull it really tight in order to get this thing to plug in. And it turns out, and it wasn't me, and I know it wasn't me because I didn't take any of this apart. You know how I just kind of flipped the manifold over here to get to the spark plugs? So that means the two things that were kind of crossed up, I didn't even have to touch them. So what I did is I unplugged this one and the valve underneath it, it's one harness, and pulled it behind the intake manifold, and it actually goes in front of one of the coolant lines, and then it gives you more than enough slack right here to plug it in. Before this this harness was pulled really tight, so yeah, someone just messed up last time they were in there. Not a big deal, got it fixed. And then I just found this right here. The wipers are on the car, so I guess someone was in a rush to change the wipers and they just kind of left this here. So I'm gonna go ahead and toss this out. But let's go ahead and start up the car for the first time and find out if everything's okay. That noise you're hearing is the power steering pump. The woman said she has a leak and she has to keep adding power steering fluid. But the engine seems to be running good. I'm gonna let it come down off of its high idle because the engine is cold right now. Feels good, I don't feel any misfires. And I'm gonna go ahead and start getting this cabin air filter up here. I got the cabin air filter out. Here it goes right here. Look at this mess. It says Nissan on it. When do you think this thing was last at the dealer? That's exactly what I'm thinking. It's pretty nasty. Let's get a new one so we could compare it. It's just a little dirty. This thing had like another 5,000 miles left in it, but we're gonna go ahead and change it right now. That's crazy. This is the air that you breathe in. Now you could actually see it's up to temperature now. And what's funny is the check engine light turned off all by itself. It should be somewhere right here, I believe. You know what, let's just go ahead and double check it. Oh, it's right there. See it right next to the brake light? And no, I didn't turn it off with the scanner, and no, I didn't disconnect the battery while I was doing the job. It just turned off all by itself. But I'm gonna go ahead and clear the check engine light anyway because of the codes that are stored. One thing I did notice is that the fuel trims are still kind of around where they were before. They're like on both banks it's like 8 and the other one's like at 9 or something like that. But one thing I noticed is both of the upstream oxygen sensors aren't really moving too much. You can see bank 1 sensor 1 stays at about 300 and bank 2 sensor 1 stays at about 600. So I think the reason for our fuel trims is because we have some lazy upstream oxygen sensors. But of course it's not here for that. It's just here for the tune-up and fixing the misfire, and that seems to have been fixed because it's running really smooth now. And yeah, everything looks good, and I'm ready to just about go ahead and ship this car out of here. That new cabin air filter though, it's on point. And I did go ahead and look at that power steering leak. She told me that it just needs a hose, like the high pressure side, because she took it to a shop like a year ago and that's what they told her it needs. But I looked at it very quickly, and yeah, I could see a hose that's really like moist, you know, just signs of it leaking. But the biggest thing, I could see the bellows on the rack and pinion are completely soaked. So I don't think just changing a high pressure side hose on the power steering system is going to fix this. She wants it done right. It's going to need a new rack and pinion most likely. So, man, I'll tell you what, this V6 got some power. Okay, so tires are bald. It's just spinning the front tires, but man, these things are fast. Normally when I get in these Nissans, they normally have the 4-cylinder, like the, what is it, the 2.5 liter. So I don't get too many Maximas around here, but yeah, this thing is fast. The thing that's kind of sketchy to me are the brakes. Jeez Louise, you gotta push the brake pedal really hard just to get this thing to start slowing down. It's kind of sketchy. I could hear the front shocks are blown out, but the engine runs absolutely great. No misfires. Feels like it has a ton of power. Alright, so that's it for this one. The engine is good, the tune-up is good, no more misfires. I'm sure the owner is going to be happy with this, man. Just every time I hit the pedal, it just keeps throwing me back in my seat. Anyway, thanks for watching and coming along on this video. So catch you guys next time. Hope you enjoyed the video.